Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. As COVID numbers drop across the nation, nursing homes and other facilities that receive Medicaid or Medicare must still meet federal vaccination guidelines or face fines.
You'll still be cited as non-compliant if you're below 100% in March.
Fines, which vary in severity, will begin in May. Among the number of ways the pandemic has affected society is a rise in alcohol consumption.
At the beginning of the pandemic, it was more of a relief. A stress relief in the evenings when I get home.
That has recovery experts concerned about potential effects on people's families and jobs. And the Indiana women's basketball team is hosting first and second round NCAA Tournament games this weekend for the first time ever. Those stories plus the latest news headlines right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana News Desk. I'm Joe Wren. Well, it's no secret the pandemic has negatively impacted Americans' mental health. Cases of anxiety and depression have skyrocketed and fatal overdoses have hit record levels. But Mitch Legan reports that 2 years into the pandemic, that alcohol consumption is still up, and recovery experts are concerned about the potential impacts.
The beginning of the coronavirus pandemic was a stressful time for Americans. With people stuck at home and unsure of the future, many turned to alcohol to cope. Studies reported a 50% spike in drinking initially, with levels remaining elevated throughout 2020. But addiction experts say it's still an issue that could have serious consequences down the road.
Folks presenting or at least getting referred to our services, it began to increase and has been increasing to this day.
Spencer Medcalf oversees peer recovery services for emergency rooms across the IU health system. When someone arrives at an ER with substance-related issues, he connects them with recovery resources and pathways to treatment. The number of patients he sees with alcohol issues has soared since the pandemic, increasing 65% from 2019. Last month's numbers were the highest for a February since the program started.
Prior to COVID, what we were seeing were folks that maybe were drinking, 5 to 6 beers, or maybe kind of at that level where they didn't really need inpatient detox or things of that nature. And now I would say most patients that we're seeing related to alcohol are almost slam dunk cases for inpatient detox.
Medcalf says the people he's helping fall into two main groups: those whose recovery was interrupted by COVID and those who began drinking more because of it.
Regular with a creamer, right? Okay.
For Matt Cochran, the pandemic pushed him back to the bottle. He was recovering from alcoholism in March of 2020, but had trouble dealing with the stress that came with the pandemic.
At the beginning of the pandemic, it was more of a relief, a stress relief in the evenings when I get home. It got to the point then where I was a lot more dependent on it.
It got to the point where Cochran was drinking throughout the day, so he checked himself into treatment at Community Fairbanks Recovery Center in Indianapolis. He's been sober for 7 months now and volunteers at the coffee shop there to give back.
The scariest place for an alcoholic to be is isolating and not around anybody else. And we're at home and there's nothing else, to really do, so we drink.
As for those who started drinking more because of the pandemic, studies have shown women were impacted most. For many, it was a way to cope with the stresses of work or childcare. And for some, it still hasn't let up.
If you come home and your husband or wife is doing cocaine all of a sudden, that's a huge issue and a red flag, etc. Seeing your wife with a glass of wine on a Tuesday is just not that big of a deal. Maybe long day, I'm having a glass of wine, and so it doesn't register in the same way.
George says it'll take some time to feel the full scope of Hoosiers' increased drinking. Much of the pandemic data isn't yet available, but last year's tax revenues from alcoholic beverage sales were up $6.5 million from pre-pandemic levels. As more people return to work, many are reconsidering their drinking habits over the past couple of years.
Maybe somebody that used to start drinking at 5 or 6 o'clock starts drinking at 2 or 3 o'clock, or maybe somebody that used to have an afternoon drinks now having the morning drink. But without the accountability there's been no, consequence or no awareness about it.
The impacts could mean more medical issues for heavy drinkers, or it could impact their jobs and family life if it hasn't already.
There's not the same red flags you would have with other drug use that immediately show, hey, we should take a look at this because alcohol is so accepted. And there's often just such a delay.
George says he's been in contact with people at the State House who are actively monitoring the situation. The hope is, with things opening back up, more community-centered recovery treatment will be available, and Hoosiers who have an issue will be able to get the help they need. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
Anyone having trouble with alcohol or other substances can call the state's addiction hotline. Petitioners are challenging in court the two areas up for annexation by the city of Bloomington. County residents against annexation filed a petition in Monroe Circuit Court Wednesday against Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton, City Council, and Monroe County Auditor Catherine Smith. The petitioners also want to review the remonstration signatures that were voided by Smith's office. Now, residents in areas 1A and 1B reached the more than 51% of remonstration signatures needed to appeal the annexation in court.
I feel that we have a strong case that will inform the judge, that will enable him to make a proper and deliberate judgment.
The other 5 areas reached the more than 65% threshold to void annexation. Well, we're joined now by Holden Absher for the latest headlines from around the area. Hello.
Hi, Joe. The EPA has awarded the Monroe County Community School Corporation $160,000 to purchase 4 new electric vehicle buses to lower district costs and emissions. Binta Boutier has this report.
MCCSC Director of Transportation Nathan Oliver says the funds will help the district reach its goal of covering all general routes with EV buses in the next 7 to 10 years. The district already has 3 EV vehicles in its fleet in addition to 145 diesel and 10 gasoline-powered buses. The 3 EV buses are already saving the district $34 a day.
So as we add additional buses, that's just more air pollution, less air pollution, better air quality for Monroe County. And the district is saving funds, money on fuel cost.
When the district began using the first EV bus 2 years ago, MCCSC saved more than 1,000 gallons of diesel fuel and avoided 25 tons of carbon dioxide in the first year alone, Oliver says. The new buses come as gas prices are rising across the country. Oliver expects diesel prices for the district to rise to $5 a gallon by the end of the year. That means savings from the addition of the new EV buses could be closer to $50 a day.
Even the emotional well-being they get from riding on the bus, because the EV is so clean, so quiet, they're not having to yell over the diesel engine as they go through the route. So it's a lot calmer, a lot quieter on the bus.
MCCSC was the only district in Indiana to receive funding from the program. It was also the district to receive the greatest award among 21 school districts in the Midwest. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Binta Boutier.
MCCSC parents and students can expect the new buses to go into commission by the end of the year. A wildlife park in Paoli has been fined for multiple violations of the Animal Welfare Act by the USDA. Along with $8,000 worth of fines, the Williston Wildlife Park faces federal violations for euthanizing a llama, inadequate fencing, shade, and shelter for the animals, and a lack of protection for guests when interacting with animals. PETA's Clayton Rutherford claims it's business as usual.
This isn't a one-off incident. This isn't just an accident. This is willful animal abuse, and the facility has proven that it's incapable of keeping animals alive, much less properly caring for them.
In a statement, the park admitted proper protocols had been followed and says collective action has been immediately taken. The park says that since paying the fines, they've been inspected 4 times and had no violations. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita's office spent at least $2,300 for his trip to the U.S.-Mexican border in January that included a stop at a Donald Trump rally along the way, state records show. The cost included flight, gas, rental car, and hotel expenses for Rokita and 2 staffers for the trip, which Rokita joined several other Republican state attorney generals for a border security briefing with Texas Governor Greg Abbott. The state Democratic Party criticized Rokita for spending taxpayer money on what it called a political trip. Governor Eric Holcomb has signed legislation into law that expands the definition of rape in Indiana to include the element of consent. Several lawmakers have spent years trying to get the crime's definition widened in state law. Under the long-standing state definition of rape, an assault has to include the threat of force, serious bodily injury, or involve drugs. The new law broadens the definition of rape to include any sexual activity done to someone without their permission through words or conduct.
Our public policy hasn't evolved the way the general public's thinking about rape is concerned.
According to state data, 1 in 5 Hoosier women have experienced sexual assault. Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb has vetoed a bill aiming to limit the ability of state agencies to adopt new regulations, saying that it includes provisions that would threaten about $150 million in broadband internet projects. The broadband projects were included in regional development grant requests that are receiving $500 million in state funding. Holcomb said in his veto letter that provisions in the bill would jeopardize work planned in at least 28 counties. The Bloomington Plan Commission granted approval for a 21,000 square foot office building in a portion of the empty lot diagonal from the mill in the downtown trades district. The development will feature office space on the first 2 floors and an outdoor terrace on the 3rd floor. The city says the tech center is meant as a graduation space for the mill.
It's speculative in that we don't have tenants yet, but we're building it for potential users that we think are kind of next in line in the growth cycle.
The project is part of the city's goal to build onto the trades district with a $3.5 million CARES Act Recovery Assistance Grant awarded September 3rd last year. Indiana University Health quietly donated $416 million to the Indiana University School of Medicine, a move that comes as the state's largest hospital system faces pressure to lower its prices and profits. The donation wasn't announced by either institution, but was noted as a contribution to a related entity made December 3rd in IU's health financial statements released this month. The Indianapolis Business Journal first reported the gift. IU Health is a nonprofit organization that operates 16 hospitals around the state. Officials are investigating the cause of a fire at the Charles Deem Wilderness overnight Monday. Hoosier National Forest spokesperson Marion Mason said the fire was out by the time authorities arrived Tuesday morning, thanks to increased humidity overnight.
The suspected cause at this point is potentially an unattended campfire.
Preliminary estimates put the fire's impact at about 10 acres near part of the Grub Ridge Trail between the Peninsula and Axum Branch trails. Grub Ridge Trail was closed Tuesday as crews cleared trees that might have been unsafe from the blaze. The trail has since reopened. That's all the time we have for headlines, Joe. Now back to you.
All right, thanks, Holden. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk.
Facilities that don't meet federal guidelines for COVID vaccinations could start facing fines soon. And the Indiana women's basketball team will be home for the first 2 rounds of the NCAA Tournament.
These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Stay close to Indiana Newsdesk as we trace education issues all the way from the Capitol to your child's classroom. So many topics that arise each year in the State House affect what happens every day in the schoolhouse. The WTIU News Team is committed to helping you stay up to date with the issues that affect your family's future. Keep yourself informed. Tune in to Indiana Newsdesk, your source for regional and state in-depth news.
Wake up.
Wake up to the world.
To the marvels. The mayhem.
The music.
Wake up to the wows. The woes.
The wonder.
Wake up to the commotion. To the beauty.
To the humanity.
to the hope. Wake up every morning, fully awake.
NPR Morning Edition.
Tune in to your local station or download the NPR app.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, in an age where there seems to be two sides of every issue, one question that gets asked is, why do some people think that climate change isn't happening? Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel asked an assistant professor at Indiana University who studies climate engagement.
Nathaniel Geiger says it's important to know that only about 20 to 25% of Hoosiers don't believe climate change is happening or just aren't sure. He says some people reject scientific findings that they can't see for themselves. People who believe the Earth is flat, for example, usually don't have the opportunity to go into space.
And similarly, climate change is complex enough. The phenomenon is complex enough that when we experience warmer or cooler temperatures, it's hard to know what to make of those.
Geiger says you might also reject the idea of climate change if its solutions conflict with your worldview. If you believe the free market is the best way to solve problems, you might have trouble with more regulations on industry to curb emissions. But even people who believe the science can have some denial. You might put climate change out of your mind when making decisions that could help solve the problem.
Hey, if we take action on climate change, there's going to be all these things that will change, and that will be scary, and you don't want that. So let's not take action.
He says that's why it's important to talk with people about it and what positive solutions you want to see. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
You have a question about climate change or climate solutions? Sign up for the Indiana Two-Way by texting Indiana to 73224. That's Indiana to 73224. Dozens of Indiana nursing homes could soon be cited as non-compliant with the federal government's vaccine mandate. Brock Turner has more on how the rule could impact Medicare and Medicaid funding if employees aren't vaccinated.
For Ken and Oma Buckner, getting vaccinated wasn't a complicated decision.
For one thing, I didn't want to get it, and I didn't want to give it to my family. And if I could do anything that might stop that from happening, the vaccinations were the choice. It's a really crazy virus, and it's been going on a long time.
The Buckners are in good company. They're residents at Sugar Grove Senior Living in Plainfield. Around 85% of Hoosiers residing in nursing homes are fully vaccinated. After experiencing the virus firsthand, they were even happier to receive their vaccines and booster shots.
I was sitting down at the cafeteria eating lunch, and the nurse came along and said, "We want to test you." I thought, well, okay. And so they did the test, and they said, "Sir, you are positive. We got to take you home, back to your room." And it sort of hit me, gee, I'm a dangerous person.
His wife, Oma, was impacted too.
I came back here, and the nurse came by and said, "You're not supposed to be in there playing bingo. You're supposed to be in isolation," because he was. So that's the only thing I really missed was playing bingo.
Ken never experienced symptoms, which he credits to his vaccine and booster effectiveness. His wife, Oma, never tested positive. That's an example they and other health experts point to for the efficacy of vaccines. However, not all nursing home staff members are on board. Just over 78% of staff are fully vaccinated. That means there are hundreds of workers who still need to be vaccinated or file an exemption in order for their employers to be compliant with federal rules.
Now it's mandatory across the board for basically every healthcare provider and supplier that provides services to Medicare and Medicaid residents.
Fines, which range in severity, start in May for states like Indiana that challenged the federal rule.
You'll still be cited as non-compliant if you're below 100% in March, but they'll withhold actual monetary enforcement until 90 days from the rule. We have buildings that are at 100% today. There are a handful of them, right? So they are working towards it. So I do believe that a lot of facilities will either be at that 100% compliance level and certainly be above 80% so that they can avoid financial penalty and continue to work towards that 100% goal that will end up being ultimately enforced in May.
Sugar Grove is an assisted living facility and not required to report its data to the federal government. The facility's parent company, Tuterra, said it supported vaccinations and is working with staff to ensure everyone was vaccinated. Erica Bowman is the administrator at Miller's Mary Manor in Hope. Her facility is required to report.
I personally was a little surprised that there was as much resistance.
85% of her staff were compliant as of February 22nd, but the rate of boosted staff is even lower, which is common across Indiana. Fewer than 1 in 3 staff are boosted, while 75% of residents are.
I think that there was a lot of confusion of Omicron not being a severe virus, right? And so you're vaccinated already and you're already protected. And so the booster with this less severe strain, maybe it's not as important. And, I think that information is unfortunate. That belief or choice is unfortunate.
Bowman says she sees less resistance to the booster in her facility, which is above the state's average, and partially blamed the timing of when staff received shots. Education and trust are key too, she says.
So having those relationships and having that trust where the staff knows that if they have questions, if they have concerns, they have someone that is there to support them and talk them through concerns and that kind of thing.
Cattell and public health experts agree building trust is an effective but arduous task. Ken Buckner generally agrees, but offered a slightly different approach.
Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And this is one of those times, and so it's infringing on your benefits and infringing on your rights to get a shot. Big woo.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Brock Turner.
Making the NCAA tournament has become a regular occurrence for the IU women's basketball team, but for the first time this weekend, the Hoosiers will be hosting opening round games at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. Pat Bean reports.
Indiana returned all 5 starters from last year's team that reached the Elite 8 for the first time in school history, so success this year was not unexpected. The Hoosiers started the season ranked number 8 in the nation and reached as high as number 4 before a late-season slump left them 11th in the final Associated Press poll. It's something IU has been building up to since Terry Morin took over as head coach in 2014.
When we arrived eight years ago, this is really what we envisioned. Every year to take a step, another step.
The next step this year was earning a number 3 seed in the NCAA tournament and the right to host first and second round games this weekend. Indiana will play number 14 seed Charlotte in Saturday's first game. Kentucky and Princeton meet in the second game, with the winners playing Monday for a chance to advance to the Sweet 16.
Our field is really good. Princeton's a really good team. Obviously, Kentucky's a really good team. And so, first things first for us, we're going to focus, on Charlotte and what we have to do to get to the next round.
Indiana likely would have hosted the first 2 rounds last year, but due to COVID-19, the entire tournament was played in San Antonio. There, the Hoosiers came within a game of reaching the Final Four. Making that deep of a run in the tournament was not only a learning experience, but a driving force this year for IU.
But also remember losing in the Elite 8 too. So, and just the big feel of the stage that we were on. We know what that feels like.
Pat Berg is technically in her 7th season of college basketball. She missed 2 years with injuries, set out a season because of NCAA transfer rules, and was granted an extra season this year because of the pandemic. One of the reasons she came back was a chance to build on last year.
That's, why we play all season, obviously to work to get into the NCAA tournament, but also, we wanted to host, and that was a goal of ours.
It's been a team effort for the Hoosiers. All 5 starters averaged double figures in scoring, led by guard Grace Berger's 16.3 points a game. Center Mackenzie Holmes averages 15.5 points and a team-best 7 rebounds a game. But an injury to her late in the year threatened to derail the season. The Hoosiers were 12-2 in mid-January when Holmes had surgery on her left knee and missed the next 8 games. When she returned, the Hoosiers struggled to regain their form and lost 4 of their final 5 games. But IU came alive in the Big Ten tournament and reached the championship game before falling to Iowa.
We battled that adversity and those hard times, and we're still a 3 seed and hosting, and we get another chance to play in Assembly Hall. I think it's just a major blessing, and I'm super happy about it.
As are the fans who get to see the Hoosiers at home at least one more time. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Pat Bean.
And an Indianapolis electronics recycler is one of 19 places around the country that will receive a federal grant to train people to work with hazardous waste. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports the nonprofit Recycle Force helps people recently released from prison and jail get certified to do a variety of jobs in the field.
The $200,000 grant comes from the federal infrastructure law. Recycle Force officials say it will help them train an additional 40 people to safely handle e-waste, like computers, TVs, and phones, and other hazardous materials too.
That's gold right there.
Recycle Force helps to keep toxic heavy metals out of the landfill. Rob Smith directs the nonprofit's board and supervises its warehouse.
We are saving the earth. What we do every day, we saving the earth for the kids, children, teachers, whatever. We earth savers.
EPA officials say as the agency works to clean up more contaminated properties around the country, they're going to need more people trained to do this work. Tyra James has been training for a little over a year at Recycle Force and wears a mentor's vest.
I want to own my own business one day, so that's what they helping me get ready for, to be a leader.
Though Recycle Force is the only location in Indiana to receive the EPA grant this year, the agency will give out a total of $30 million in grants over 5 years. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallor Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.